All right, welcome back. So we are picking up in Revelation 18, where we've been talking about the destruction of Babylon and how it's long been prophesied for it to occur. And now we're going to see how the world is going to respond to the destruction of Babylon, starting in chapter 18, verse 9. We'll read verse 9 and 10, and it says, "And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come." So everyone is going to be affected by this city's downfall, every class of people. So whether people realized it or not, this city that's called Babylon here is the main player in the trade of all the things that are going to be listed in the following verses, up to and including the souls of men. Okay, this city trades in everything. The kings of the earth, when it fails, are going to lament her. They're going to see that her destruction is sudden. It comes within an hour. And they're trembling in fear when they see what's happened to this city, this capital, this great city of the world. Now, why are they watching it from so far off? Well, we don't know. Is it because a nuclear weapon shows up? Is it because a supernatural destruction from God's there? We can't be sure, but we understand that she is beyond the aid of all the technology in all the world. There's nothing that can save her. Despite the world loving this city, there's nothing they can do to save her. Now, that's a pretty big contradiction that the kings of the earth here are mourning and upset. It's a big contradiction to how they felt about the harlot falling. The kings were happy to see her destroyed, right? Because they hated her. Revelation 17, verse 16 and 17 said, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast," and they are already described as these 10 kings, "these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and shall burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled." So these kings, they had originally profited off this false religious system, took all their profits, destroyed the religious system, and then submitted it all to this king under the Antichrist, who then took all those resources into his new capital, Babylon. And they've invested heavily in this new capital, Babylon, and this new world religion where this man sits at the top, starting with the abomination of desolation, making himself to be God. And so they're going to put all their resources there. So they weren't distressed to see the harlot fall, but they're very distressed to see Babylon, this capital city of the Antichrist, fall. One other reason they might be watching afar off is because they have been ordered by the Antichrist to gather at a particular valley, getting ready to attack Israel, who's in hiding in Jordan, right? And that valley is called in the Valley of Jezreel, right? Or Har Megiddo, in the Mount of Megiddo, or the Valley of Megiddo, right? So all of their investment, all of their power, everything they invested into this city is going to be destroyed all of a sudden, and they can do nothing about it. There's nothing they can do to stop it. And it makes their faith in their leader shake, and this Antichrist, whatever his name may be. But they're not the only group who are upset at the loss of this city. The next group starts in verse 11. It says, "And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. Their merchandise of gold and silver and precious stone, of pearls, of fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all fine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and the souls of men." So there's a pretty big market supported by this. What if it was an economically linked market with a digital currency? And what if all those databases that all that ran through were suddenly destroyed? How would you trade? Wouldn't everything, whether it be food, whether it be building materials, whether it be jewelry, whether it be anything, wouldn't all that trade stop in a moment? What if all the databases of the registered offenders who claim to be Christians or refuse to submit to the Antichrist. What if that all disappeared? What if you could no longer trade in the souls of men? The bounty that could be received by turning in suspected Christians. What if all that disappeared in a day? Do you see where all of that could happen if all of this was centered in one city? Be a huge market. Even today, before we even get to the point of the tribulation, think of the massive market that religion holds, the consolidation of power that it holds. There's money given at churches every day of the week. There are television shows, right, that solicit money if in the name of God, right? There's books sold on faith. There's movies based on religion. There's a lot of political gain by presenting yourself at church, by going and getting this church group or that church group to support you. How about food donated in the name of the church? Clothes that is donated to church? The buildings themselves. Have you seen some of these beautiful buildings? Well, not just Christianity, but among any world religion, right? Go to Hinduism, go to Buddhism, go to these temples, go to the cathedrals, go wherever you want. These massive steeples around Wheeling, for example. It's everywhere. But how about beyond that? What about all the church functions? What about all the schools that are funded by churches, right? What about all the affiliated hospitals? You know, very few hospitals you've ever been to weren't started by a church. Very few, right? Same thing with universities. All these other religious organizations, and the list goes on and on and on. And then look at the actual amount of real estate churches own. You'll see some of the nicest pieces of property occupied by religious buildings, excuse me. And every day, again, the treasures those churches own are worth millions to billions. That's again today. What if all of that was absorbed into one political stronghold, the Antichrists, right? What if it was all given to him? Now add to that, once the religious stuff goes in, add to that the things we just talked about with financial records, medical records, right? All of the transactions, all world organizations being centered in one city from all the different nations, having all their prime people all centered in one city. And what's interesting about the list that was given, it's listed in order of importance to the world. The very last thing on the list were people's souls. Isn't that quite the opposite of where the church truly stands, the true bride of Christ stands? So this place is the headquarters of the Antichrist, wherever it may be, and all of the financial wealth comes through it. So everything that had to be built goes down within an hour, and worldwide businesses are instantly bankrupt. That's it. Life savings wiped out. All the software gone. I mean, today we depend a whole lot on technology, even for our own day-to-day safety. When it comes to elevators, how about self-driving cars? What about your bank account? When you swipe that debit card, don't you trust that it's going to subtract the correct amount from your bank account? We put all this faith in. Imagine if all of a sudden all that was gone. We'd have a major problem, because while I may have $1 million in the bank, what if the bank decided I had zero? What now, right? I mean, it's not that hard to imagine how quickly this could be wrecked in no time, right? So again, all of that now, assuming all that survives the tribulation, it would go away in a moment. What if most of it's already gone, because of the events of the tribulation? So they're pretty upset. And we go on in verse 14, it says, and the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which are dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, so now's the next group, the merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. So they can't buy and sell the things they just did, and they're also going to have to stand far away and say, alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. So not only, again, we talked about the religious center, here this is proof, this city is the economic center of the world. All transactions, all luxury items go through it, wiped away in a moment with no time to salvage a cent. You can't transfer anything out of there. So the kings are upset, the merchants are upset, and then those who transport the goods and the information are going to be lamenting as well. Verse 17 says, for in 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster And all the company and ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. So thinking of Babylon, all right, historically, it was a very well-protected city during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Had a massive, mighty wall. They said you could race several chariots because of how wide the wall was. Very powerful. And the city was actually fed by 2 rivers. It was taken by the Persians, according to history and the Bible. It was taken by the Persians when they diverted the river that ran under the wall. They diverted it to make the water levels drop, and they were able to sneak into the city. In Josephus, he records how Cyrus came in to invade the city, and Daniel met him, reading a scroll to him that was written from the book of Isaiah over 100 years prior, telling the position that Cyrus would hold and how God would use him. So that actually came from Isaiah chapter 44, starting in verse 28, going through 45 to verse 5. It says, "That saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid." Cyrus, when he first captured Babylon, was told, hey, guess what? You're going to order for Jerusalem, you're going to order Jerusalem to be rebuilt and the temple to be rebuilt. And he believed it, and he did it, right? Verse 1 of chapter 45 continues, says, "Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him." He's going to be victorious over all the nations. "And I will loose the loins of kings." Kings will poop their pants or pee their pants before you. That's exactly what happened to Belshazzar, right? And so all these things are going to happen. "To open before him the 2 leaved gates, Babylon will fall to you, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places." Why? "That thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee." I've given you your name, Cyrus the Great. I've surnamed thee, that though thou hast not known me. "I am the Lord, there is none else. There is no God beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me." Imagine Cyrus, who's just conquered the entire planet, gets a letter saying, hey, by the way, this is all by my hand, and here's what you have to do. Cyrus was very wise to say, yes, I will do what you've just told me. He understood. He didn't be like Nebuchadnezzar, say, I did all this. He recognized there is a God, and this is him, and here's the evidence. So he believed Daniel's prophecy that was written over 100 years before his birth, and he allows the nation of Israel to return to their country and to their temple. He brags in history that he captured Babylon without a battle. That's a remarkable thing for one of the most heavily fortified cities in history. History tells us that the priests that were in Babylon actually were happy to accept Cyrus because they had lost interest in Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, right? He wasn't a very good king, unfortunately. And of course, as we talked about before, not only did Cyrus make this their capital for the Medo-Persian Empire, also Alexander the Great captured Babylon, made it his capital during his campaign, and was going to make it the capital of his empire at the time of his death. In 75 AD, about the time the book of Revelation was written, right around that time, people still traded in Babylon, right? It's a much smaller town because the great city had just kind of deteriorated and been ignored. But Babylon's destruction said it will never be inhabited again. And as we mentioned very strongly the last couple of sessions, that has yet to happen. That's happened earlier. So in Isaiah 13, and I'm not going to read it again, the kingdoms of the nation, they gathered together in Babylon in the day of the Lord, which the Bible very clearly shows us to be the day of judgment, the tribulation that's coming, right? And Israel will be in their own land when Babylon is going to be destroyed. Israel will have been regathered together when Babylon is destroyed. Again, that has not yet happened. It certainly hasn't happened since 1948. So Israel was not in its own land, assuming again that this is after 70 AD when Revelation was written. Israel had been dispersed, right? They had been in the great diaspora, I guess you could call it, for the modern times. They've been dispersed and they weren't in their land, but there was a prophecy that they would come back. And that leads us to the passages of Isaiah 13 that we had read earlier. So you can choose to take the destruction of Babylon as written, literally, as a physical destruction of the city. And like I said before, some people take it figuratively to symbolize something. So either, and again, it's not to say someone's right or wrong, but either Babylon means Babylon or it means something else. So we read that there was a judgment coming on the world. Remember in Zechariah 5, we've mentioned that passage a couple times during this study. There's a judgment. He talked about a flying scroll where the judgment from God is coming on all the earth. And during this judgment, we see this woman who represents wickedness, covered by a talent of lead and flown to the land of the Chaldeans, which is the land of Babylon. And while she's in the land of Shinar, a house is built for her. She has a new city built around her, okay? Now, these prophecies would be strange if nothing was ever carried to this land. But it would seem to me that the Bible wants to make it clear that there is something yet future for Babylon, and its biblical level of destruction will come, okay? And I think it all starts with the harlot, but it ends with the Antichrist. So then we get to verse 18 and 19 of Revelation 18. It says, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning. So those who transport the materials, they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto that great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by the reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Can you just even imagine if Florida was the only place that sold oranges and there was big business in transporting oranges, and then all of a sudden something destroyed all the oranges in Florida? Not only are the people who owned the oranges in trouble, but also those who transported are in trouble. All world finance goes through this city, everything, every penny, and nobody can do a thing without it, right? They've essentially backed themselves into a corner. But there are 3 more groups that are going to be affected by the destruction of Babylon. What's up, Becky? We are near the end of the 7 years here, because this destruction is connected to the kings of the east coming across and ultimately connected to the gathering of all the armies in Armageddon. And because of that, that is essentially the final place where Jesus returns and wipes out his enemies. So I would say this is, again, I can't be specific, but I would say in the last part of the 7th year before the return of Christ. Okay. All right. So who's the other 3 groups that are going to be affected by the destruction of Babylon? Verse 20 tells us, says, rejoice over her, just like we saw this prophecy in the Old Testament, that heaven would rejoice over the destruction of Babylon. It says, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. The vengeance has been carried out. So heaven, the apostles, and the prophets are told to rejoice. Now, again, this is the only place in the Bible you're going to see in the book of Revelation, I should say, where God actually commands the saved to rejoice. This is a major event from the heavenly perspective. The angel took a mighty stone, okay? So you're going to see in the next couple of verses where this mighty stone is actually taken and casts it into the sea. Let me ask you a question. Has anybody ever thrown a rock in the water? Even a small rock. Let's start with a very small rock. What happens to it?
Ripples.
It what?
Ripples.
It ripples the water. What happens to the stone? Sinks to the bottom. So unlike Monty Python, they don't float, right? Stones don't float. How about the bigger the rock? Is it any more likely to float? No, it's going to sink to the bottom, because once it's destroyed, it will not resurface. That's the picture you're given of the destruction of Babylon. So the voice of Jesus actually tells us will no longer be heard there, right? It's this city is responsible for the blood of the prophets that were all slain. The earth is mourning. Everyone on earth is upset, but everyone in heaven is rejoicing. They're happy to see it go. Again, I ask you, if you look in the Bible, look at where Christians have been affected, Look at what's going to happen during the tribulation. What is it that people were asking in heaven that were under the altar? They wanted vengeance for their murders, right? They wanted vengeance for being murdered. Murdered by who? By the Antichrist and his followers. The city that is centered out of is the city everyone wants to see destroyed. So it's a city that God promised revenge on, both through history, but those specifically who died during the tribulation. So whenever you try to decide which city are we talking about, again, you know my view that it's Babylon. But here's some of the features you got to keep in mind. Number one, the city is filled with demons and every foul spirit and every unclean bird. She has to have done business with the entire world and has enriched all nations. She has to be excessively sinful, right? The mother of harlots. She has to specifically want to kill all Christians and remnants of Israel, right? Wants to see everyone. It has to be responsible for countless deaths, the number that no man could number, according to John, right? She has to consider herself the religious center of the world. Now, some people argue, and some, again, good Christian people, they argue that this has to be New York City. And I'm like, I don't think so, but that's what they think. And that's okay. And again, some people think. Other people say, no, this has to be Rome, right? Or some other historical church, because look at the histories of, the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church will even acknowledge there were some major mistakes and atrocities they committed, right? So this must be that. Well, I personally hold the view that John could very easily have said, Rome. This is Rome, right? He said that great city, Rome. Rome is well known. Remember, where did most of the apostles, who martyred them? Rulers of Rome. Why was John sitting on the island of Patmos, exiled? Because of Rome. Where were the Christians being greatly persecuted during it? He wrote letters from Jesus to them. They were all being persecuted from Rome. And if the chapter said Rome, well, then it would all make sense, wouldn't it? But it would actually be a much harder sell if I'm writing a book saying that Babylon's the one going to be destroyed, because everyone's going to be like, who cares about Babylon? It's an irrelevant little town. But yet John was given the message to say it's Babylon that will fall. So if Rome was an unknown city at that time, I could say, okay, maybe it was Rome, maybe symbolically. But he very easily could have said that. They even wrote letters to the Romans, didn't they? So anyways, he said Babylon, and I think that if you look at all the other prophets of the Bible, they were all ridiculed for their prophecies whenever they didn't look like it was something that was going to happen. When they talked about, Bethlehem being the place where the Messiah was going to be born, people were like, give me a break. Whenever they talked about, he shall be called a Nazarene, right? Or a branch, everybody was like, oh, come on, nothing good comes from Nazareth. Well, guess what? Was the Bible true or people's opinions true? Right? So anyways, they ridiculed them. And I take that same view here. Again, that's not to say I'm right, but I believe all biblical prophecy is to be fulfilled. And I think that includes Babylon, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this before, it is one of the most prophesied about cities in the Bible. There's so much in there about it. It's mentioned over 260 times, both its past, its present, and its future. So why would we all of a sudden say, yeah, he meant it about its past, he meant it about its then present, but he didn't mean it about its future? I don't follow that. But again, that's just opinion. Well, then we get to verse 21 down to verse 24. It says, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and of musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. So if I say something's going to happen no more at all, does it mean a little bit? Or does it mean mostly? Or does it mean no more at all in thee? So again, as I mentioned earlier, heavy millstone. You guys know what millstones are? Back whenever they have these roofs made of dirt, they have these big, massive round stones they would use to flatten them, to compact that dirt so like water and stuff wouldn't get through. Well, these millstones, they're incredibly heavy in order to compact all that dirt. So to cast one in the sea, it's not coming back. It's not coming back out. The destruction is permanent. Now, again, some people say, well, the events of Revelation, they must have all already happened. Some people believe that this is all in the past for us today. Now, again, if that's so, my question is, where is the destroyed city that this happened to? And I don't, as far as I'm aware, there is not one where this degree of destruction has happened. So clearly, this is something yet future. And as we mentioned, it happens after Israel is brought back into the land. And the Old Testament prophets, they compared the destruction of Babylon to, again, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they were utterly destroyed, and no one has tried to go back and live there. Nobody tries to live there at all. In this city, it says much blood will be found there. So the main lesson we learn here is that the carnal world and the devil and the Antichrist one day is going to make a lot of big and wonderful sounding promises. They're here to fix your problems. You need to work hard. You need to work hard and get ahead, and you're going to have it all in this world. You want riches, you want power. We're starting a new business that's going to bring everything into one area. Invest here. Invest your money, invest your heart, invest your faith, all into us. It's going to sound great, but it's a lie. It doesn't pay off in the end. Okay, not even a little bit. The world around us is passing away. You are sitting here, and as you look around, get up and look around. There are more people smoking marijuana today than smoke cigarettes. Learned that earlier today. That's pretty impressive. Yes, ma'am.
I watched a YouTube recently about in Vancouver, apparently, Trudeau has made all the drugs legal in Vancouver.
Great.
I mean, and the city's an absolute mess.
Right. Well, I mean,
like, hello.
well, the question is, when you allow more of these things that people claim they want, okay, I'm for it. Let's see what happens. Has the quality of life improved? When you look at people who regularly smoke marijuana, are they happier, or are they more anxious, more sick, more ill, have more disease? Are they more prone to drug use? Are they more prone to all these? We know the answer. We've seen the answer. Same thing with alcohol. All of these things. We are now living in a world where you are actively seeing the world die. It's dying all around you, right? It's all going to die no matter what the world promises. You see it passing away before our very eyes. Now, again, today we're all about, no, it's your life, live it, enjoy it. It's your career, work hard, stay on top, go to the top. How about your politics? No, if we just elect that one girl, that one guy, everything's going to be great. They're going to fix all of our problems. Whatever else you want to consider. What did John tell us earlier in his letters? In 1 John 2:17, he says, and the world, oh, it's dying. The world passeth away, and the lust thereof. Everything you could desire in this world, it's all dead, dying. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. There is only one thing that will last, and that's where you're going to spend eternity. Do you know they asked Jesus, what is the will of God? What is the will of God? That we should do the works of God. What's the work of God? He says, the work of God is to believe on the one whom he has sent. That's it, right? We are all, every one of us, destined to hell if we're on our own, no matter what effort you put towards it, because of the sins we've committed. But God, who is rich in mercy, sent his son to die for us. There's a passage, you guys may have heard it. Nobody really knows this passage. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Guys, the invitation is open. Babylon is failing. There is nothing this world has to offer you. I don't care how much you want to cling to the things of this world. Loved ones that have passed away, loved ones that are still here. I want to make this world great for my daughter. This world is over. You need to prepare your children for the world to come, your friends, yourself, your family. Be ready for the world to come. The invitation is open. Don't let it pass you by. Don't put your trust in Babylon. Put it in Jesus Christ. That comes to the end of chapter 18. Any final thoughts or comments? Becky?
So you probably. So do you think this, since it's not set up right now, Babylon,
Mhm.
now, you think that can happen?
Right, so what I believe is gonna happen. Now, regardless what I believe, Babylon, whatever it represents, will be the seat of power of the Antichrist, and it is not the seat of power today. Because the seat of power today, if it's New York, that means America is the source of power. But all nations are gonna make deals with whatever this seat of power is. So I don't believe that it is the seat right now. Now, my personal belief is that it will physically be a rebuilt Babylon. Like an actual buildings, everything rebuilt, and it'll be under construction. It could be under construction next week. But when it gets actually the authority and the power and the computers and the investment, because you're gonna need a whole world to agree to devote all their resources to one place. We think that it takes a long time to build all these buildings and do all these things. But but you see right now, if you go to Japan and they need to build a road, it's not months of construction. It's days to weeks and they get it done. So you get the best builders from around the world volunteering their time and their resources, you'll build a city in months. It won't take long. And if you bring all the technology with you, it wouldn't take long to get everything up and running either. So in my personal view, it will be a physically built Babylon, but regardless of what view you take, the city will be, the infrastructure will be put together very quickly to run all the world's businesses wherever they choose to put it. Okay? Anything else?
So the stuff in 16, chapter 16,
Correct. That's whenever Jesus comes in and essentially tramples all the enemies at Armageddon. Correct. That's when the rivers of blood are there. Now we're stepping back to see what happens on the earth today.